A common question that has been amongst the Ninjago community basically since day one is how the layout of the Ninjago map actually works. We actually do know the location of some places, we know the location of certain areas that are fascinating, but for the most part things are genuinely left within shrouded mystery. But the thing is that with Dragons Rising and the merge happening, things got only more confusing. Because we had this brand new map that for the most part we just weren't really aware of where was what. There were some very steady implications and realms that were easy to identify, but there were a lot of realms that basically were up to interpretation. All we simply knew was where the land was and not what it was. So I have always been wondering as to how that layout could truly look, and people have given their own interpretations over time. But personally speaking, I finally wanted to take my own jab at it and see where each and every single realm is. So that is going to be what we do today. We are going to take a map of the merged lands and give the best interpretation we can as to where each realm is, taking visual clues and just taking general hints that we've gotten throughout the course of the show. And of course, this is my interpretation. We may disagree, we may agree, but if we do disagree, I would love to know what you think in the comments down below. This is ultimately just my own idea on how it could be, but I definitely want to know what your guys' is as well. But let me not waste any more of your time and let's get into it, because there's a fair few realms to go through. And here we have the map of the merged lands itself. This is the most recent interpretation on what we actually have in the lovely MS Paint. But as you can see, there are definitely some easy ones here to identify. So we will go through them accordingly with, well, basically easiest to hardest. We may as well start off with the easiest one, like I said. Of course, Ninjago wraps around this little curve here, but then goes around the Island of Light and the Island of Darkness. This is, well, just a fairly safe one to conclude. This is just Ninjago as we know it. I'm gonna, do my best to be legible, but obviously, there's not really much of a debate here. This is just to establish the center. So yeah, Ninjago. The next realm that we are going to identify is going to be Imperium. It is the only one connected to the Ninjago island itself, and obviously we know for a fact that this is Imperium here. We know because it's in direct line of Ninjago City, and obviously the symbol is another way to get away with it. But Imperium is a bit too long to write here, so between cuts I'm probably just going to have to add it in very smallly. But yeah, this is where Imperium is going to be. The third realm, which feels fairly comfortable to identify in my opinion, is going to be this piece of land in the bottom left hand corner. This, as far as I can tell, is actually the Nether Realm. It makes sense considering that it's disconnected. It's also got that temple that's very similar to the ice one that we got to see. I do think this is a fairly safe assumption to make. I do think, honestly, it just kind of works to be here. I just kind of like this interpretation. The fourth realm that we are going to identify is going to be this piece of land here. Based on what we see with this landmark, it seems fairly safe to say that this chunk here is actually going to be Umbra Sylvis. I mean, it just strikes me the most comfortably as the city that we saw, and it makes sense that it is in proximity to Ninjago because of the Explorers Club. I like to think that this is going to be where it is, although I don't know how I'm going to actually type it. Umbra. I'm just going to put that. I'm so sorry. I have never claimed to be good at MS Paint. The fifth realm I do think is also going to be over here. I do think this is another fairly safe one to identify. Based on the tent and the location of it, I would actually come to believe that this might actually be the Land of Monsters. I believe this whole section of land is going to be what is the Land of Monsters. Makes sense considering that we need some oceans for Kai. We need a place that would actually make sense that he feels lost and it feels like it's never ending. And also, that little camping spot just reminds me a lot of what Kai actually got up to. So I do think it's fairly safe to assume that this is another nice and simple to the point one. But interestingly, it's going to be from here onwards where we're actually going to get into some more difficult ones. But yeah, these five honestly felt like the safest assumptions to me. We are now actually going to talk about this chunk of land here. I don't think this is just one big realm. I actually think this may potentially be three different realms all next to each other. So I'm going to use a black line to actually differentiate them. For one, I believe this little piece down here, this is this is its own little realm here, and I believe we do have another line actually going across here. I think all three of these are different realms just based on the general aesthetic of all of them. All of them take on these different shapes and feel latched onto each other, feeling almost like the Imperium stuff here. But when you ask me what these realms are, I do think it's fairly safe to assume it. The pocket of land that goes down here, I believe this is going to be the Spectral Lands, aka the Cursed Realm and also the Departed Realm. It's a nice little chunk, which makes this section up here actually going to be the First Land. Again, feeling quite comfy in that assumption, but yeah. And then we got the last section here, which is going to be all of this, which I believe is going to actually be the Land of Madness. The reason I believe this is going to be the case is because they all do follow the general aesthetics that I would assume. For example, with Madness, this big mountain here, it would make sense that it is the mountain that we have seen before with the Land of Madness. I've just butchered that E. But then the First Land, it makes sense. It's a big-ish realm, but it doesn't need to be overly big. There's not any particular landmark that I do think would be pointed out here as well. So that's just kind of me. But it makes sense that this is going to be the first. And then obviously, if you have the First Land here, it makes sense that the Spectral Land is at the bottom. I'm just going to put an S to represent it. But those are those three realms all tied off. But we may as well finish off the right hand side because this is the only realm that we actually have left. I believe that this final space here is actually going to be the Land of Eternal Dawn. I believe this just stems from the fact that it's a fairly disconnected realm that does feel unlikely to actually be found by any given person. We know that it is difficult to get, so it just makes sense that it's one of the realms that is just, well, kind of disconnected from everything. And then once the ninja are done, they just get spit out down here. There's no link, they don't have to be connected to each other, so it does just make sense that they are given the context of what the map actually gives. But that's actually the right hand side of the map fully done. Which does bring us on to the left hand side. Now to start out, I am going to cover this little chunk of land down here. I believe by all accounts, this chunk of land is actually going to be the Land of Lee. A nice little island in proximity to Ninjago so trade can occur. I do think it makes sense that it would just be down here. Nice and isolated to itself, which we know for a fact it is, so I do think that just works in context with the rest of the islands itself. Just makes sense that Lee's just chilling down here doing his own thing. Moving up then, we do have this chunk of land here. I believe what we are looking at in this case is actually going to be the Whispering Woods. This is mostly based off of this tower here, resembling what we actually saw within Season 4. I initially thought it was going to be here, but in retrospect, I don't think so. So as far as I'm aware, this here is going to be what the Whispering Woods actually are. I think it's a nice chunk of land, makes sense because obviously it's the forest that needs to hold basically the powers of life. So yeah, Whispering Woods feels like a nice spot to have. In proximity to Ninjago as well, just makes sense in context of the Green Ninja. Above that again, once more, is this landmass. Now, I was, like I said, considering switching these two, and you could honestly at any time. But by all accounts, I believe this is actually going to be the Wildness. I think it makes sense considering the landmass. There's probably some form of Chimo reference here, but this does just generally remind me of what the Wildness actually is. This structure could also be some form of representation of the Shadow Dojo, but I don't truly know. But as far as I can tell, this is going to be where the Wildness is. It was honestly one of the last ones I pinned down for this video, and it was one of the only landmasses I had left, so well, process of elimination, and I'm confident about basically every other one, so Wildness is going to belong here. Which brings us on to the last chunk of land that we do actually have. Now this final piece I do consider to actually be Mysterium. Now you may be wondering, why is this Mysterium? Well, I just consider it basically just something that would be in proximity to Ninjago, would be in proximity to Imperium and the Wildness, but basically it's just existing on its own. I may be wrong, but as far as I can tell, this would actually be how it goes. My handwriting is absolutely terrible. But those are where I believe all of these realms to actually reside. Now there may be some contention in some of these, but I genuinely am comfortable with where everything is. Now you may be wondering to yourself, well, there are actually 3 realms missing here: the Underworld, the Cloud Kingdom, and also Ninjago. And well, that's because they don't have a strict section where they will actually reside. For example, the Underworld essentially just revolves underneath other realms, so you could basically just pin it under Mysterium, for example, because that's where we see it within the show. As for the Cloud Kingdom and also Ninjago, well, they float around. There is no definitive place where they could truly be. You could pin it to each and every single one of these islands if you truly wanted to. There are many options here, but again, it's not really something you could comfortably deduce. But as it stands, those 3 are amongst here, just not really in a strict spot like the rest of them. But that is my personal interpretation as to where each and every single realm is amongst the merged lands. I will say I apologize for how scuffed it looks, but if you're not expecting a little bit of scuff from the Weavy channel, then you probably haven't been here before. Which if you haven't, please consider subscribing, but more on that in a minute. But I would love to know, what do you think of my interpretation of the layout of the merged lands? Do you agree with my analysis? Do you disagree? Like I said, I would love to know what you guys think of it, because I do think it is fairly interesting. But as it stands for me, this is what makes the most sense. I think it works within this context, and I do think, just generally speaking, it's honestly the one that just kind of makes the most sense to me. But that's why I want to know what you guys think as well. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each view your support means the absolute world to me, and I truly cannot thank you enough. But like I said, that's about it for today, and take care. Okay,